anybody that comes and works underneath our roof, they're going to succeed.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to hire them unless they're going to succeed. And then they're realizing that they can't get the same number that they could get 3 or 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So now they're pulling them off the market.
Yeah.
Buyers, if they're smart right now and they're out looking, they can really take advantage and get a great deal on a house.
Yeah. All right, guys, welcome. Today is our first show. This is the Darin Marques Show. We're here in Las Vegas. And just to give you a quick background and what the purpose is for the show is that it's going to be a series called Recession Busters. And the reason for the show is that obviously, I was trying to come up with a name for the show and I kept thinking, God, what can I name it? And I'm like, well, my real estate group is called the Darin Marques Group. And I went to an event 2 weeks ago and they said personal branding. I'm like, all right. So I'll call it the Darin Marques Show. So pretty simple. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to tie in, I started thinking like, what is the purpose for the show and what's it going to be about? And I'm like, well, you know what? The standard topic right now, especially with us being in real estate, is talking about the recession, right? And everybody's worried about it and they're starting to get panicked. And what are we going to do? And so just to give you a little background about myself, I've always been an entrepreneur. I'm in luxury real estate now. But prior to 2008 and 2007, in the recession, I actually owned a distribution company here in Las Vegas. We serviced over 350 retail stores in the Valley. And when the market crashed, my business partner at the time, he was in the real estate, in the construction industry. And so we had to end up shutting things down, obviously, because things weren't going well. And so we shut the business down. And I'm like, man, what the hell am I going to do? And so I went and bartended, which I swore I would never do in my life, but it was fun. And everybody was going to keep drinking, right? Because they're stressed out and depressed. And so I went into bartending, and about a year into bartending, the first 6 months, I'm like, oh, this is great. I don't have to answer anybody anymore. No more employees. This is a really fun job. And then about 6 months in, I'm like, okay, I can't do this the rest of my life. I've got to do something else. And so I decided to get my real estate license. And so I started going to real estate school. Everybody thought I was crazy because they're like, do you realize you are like in the worst timing when it comes to real estate, 2008. And I'm like, yep, I get it. My idea is that I'm going to start in a downtime and I'm going to write it up. And when the market rebounds and it recovers, then I'll be at the top, and I will learn a lot during that time. And so I got my real estate license, and just a quick summary. I was in the gym one day, and a buddy of mine, who I thought was a real estate agent forever, actually ended up being a very big developer here in the Valley. But anyhow, he said the same thing to me. He's like, Darin, what the hell are you doing, man? You're getting your real estate license. It's like the worst market ever that you could do this. And I said, yeah, I know, man, but I'm going to work in the luxury space because when the market's good, they sell. And when the market's bad, they buy opportunities. And so that's what the show is about. It's how in a recession, it's not a time to look at this as like darkness and sadness and a time to freeze. I listened to a great podcast the other day. It was actually Tony Robbins, and he was talking about that, we're going into winter and you got to prepare for winter. But there's a lot of great things that we can do during this time to rebound ourselves or to spring ourselves ahead during this time so that when the market does rebound a year from now, we'll be in a really great position. So that's what the show is about. We're going to be interviewing local business owners and talking to local business owners that either were, involved in the recession and had business going during the recession and were able to survive and then thrive through that recession and come out of it even stronger. And so my first guest today is my broker, Craig Tann. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
He is the founder and CEO of Huntington and Ellis here in Las Vegas. And Craig, a couple of weeks ago you did a mastermind at the office, and you told your story about, you were ready to quit during the recession, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how you worked your way through that and you started thinking of new ways to survive. And you really gave some great insight into, what helped you get through the recession. And I think that's more important now than ever, because I think a lot of us can look at this as a negative time, but really we should be looking at this, to me, and I think you and I have talked about this, I'm excited about it. I really am. I'm excited because I think, again, just like starting in 2008, I started my team 2.5 years ago, coincidentally, right before the shutdown of COVID. Perfect timing. 3 months prior to the shutdown. And then I thought, what the hell am I doing? Obviously, we came out okay. So Craig, first of all, I want to get some background on you and talk a little bit about, number one, where are you from?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me as the first guest.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll be able to look back on this and I'll get to say that I was the first guest ever on your podcast, so I'm honored.
When we go nationwide, worldwide.
Exactly. So I grew up Long Island, New York, spent my whole life there and got into the real estate business in New York, which a lot of people don't know that. I started in the New York market when I was 19 when I started. Worked for a small independent brokerage. One of my really good friends, him and his dad owned a real estate company. So they gave me an opportunity to come work for them. Had no clue as to what I was doing. Super introverted, probably the worst business for me. In fact, my mom and my dad sat me down and they said, Craig, I don't think this is the right business for you.
That is awesome.
So it's kind of cool to reflect back on it. So I bring it up once in a while with mom and dad. And
that's a great point because so many of us start businesses and I think it's natural that family wants to protect us, right? Or friends.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes they're not trying to discourage you. They think they're doing what's right.
Yep.
So, I mean, just starting off with that is such a great point because anybody who's out there who may be hesitating or people are telling them this isn't the right business for you, that's a great thing
absolutely.
to share.
Yeah, I think most people think real estate, if you're super outgoing, super bubbly, you're going to do really well in real estate. I was definitely the opposite. I mean, super quiet. I mean, if you looked at me, I turned bright red and sweaty and sweat.
And
I still do, actually. I think I'm bright red right now.
And I think you said you looked like 12 at the time, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, when I was 19, I remember, knocking on a door for a seller and them pretty much laughing in my face, or asking where my dad was.
So
awesome. it was interesting to start in New York, and it was actually a great way to start because they were rough there. And most people in New York, nowadays, I think real estate's super attractive and sexy, and everybody young wants to do real estate. But back then, everybody, it's their second career. Most people don't start in real estate. So all the agents that were in town, they, had their first career. They were retired or somewhat retired, and then they got into real estate as their second career. So, competition was pretty fierce there, but I had a good opportunity to work for my friend and kind of learn the ropes.
And was there a specialty that you started in? I mean, I know everything back there is mostly high rise, right?
No, actually, where I grew up, it's just regular single family homes.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up on the island, so we didn't really deal. I mean, some condos and stuff like that, but for the most part, it was just single family.
Okay.
Older homes built between like the 1920s to the 1980s was kind of like the norm out there. So mostly just older properties, and it's I'm actually grateful that I started in the New York market because it really made me appreciate how Las Vegas real estate is done. Because in New York, it's a attorney state.
Yep.
So we're looking at 3 to 4 months for closings.
Oh,
so
wow.
if you're trying to start in the business and it takes you 60, 90 days to find your first client, you're 6 or 7 months for your first paycheck.
Wow.
So thankfully at the time I live with mom and dad.
Yeah.
So I moved out fairly quickly after that, but still live with mom and dad so I could afford, and I was working a job in a hospital as like a dishwasher.
Okay.
So I was able to afford to start in the business. So I'm grateful for the New York market. And then for my 21st birthday, I came out to Vegas. Didn't really see the Strip. I had a friend that had moved out here. So I came out, got a feel for like the Summerlin area. That's where he was staying. And then I think that was end of November, and January 10th or so, I packed up my car. I had a small little 1-bedroom house that I was renting, fit whatever I could in my car, and drove out here. Broke my lease and came out here by myself, and I guess the rest is history.
What was it that attracted you to Vegas?
I think just everything new and clean, and probably was running away from just how I grew up. Not that it was bad. I grew up great. Great parents, but just kind of a new start, I guess, for me.
Yeah, so separate a little bit and go on your own
and really find myself.
Out.
Put myself in that uncomfortable position of not knowing anyone. Trying to make it, the challenge of trying to make it on your own when you don't really know anybody in a whole entire city. I mean, I would encourage anyone to do that, moving out of state, not knowing anyone, you really have to figure yourself out quickly.
Kind of like burning the bridges behind you, right?
Oh, yeah.
You had no choice.
Sure. Yeah.
You had to make it work.
Yep, exactly, yeah.
So not only did your parents tell you, Craig, we don't think real estate's right, then you moved to Vegas to get into real estate.
Oh, yeah. When I told them, they actually had just, I actually sold their house, and they had just purchased a house in Florida, and they bought a little bit larger than they would have bought single story, assuming that I was going to go.
You're going with them,
And they're like, we're going to Florida. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go to Vegas. And they're like, what?
Like really? What, are you going to be a stripper?
Yeah. Well, I did that for a little while. No, I'm just kidding.
Whatever it takes to pay the bills, right?
Well, hey, you got to do what you got to do. So I came out to Vegas. I think it was, gosh, I always get this confused if it was 05 or 06. I think it was 06 when I got here.
So you were right at the start of where the market was hot and really cranking.
Yeah, so the market was cranking out here. I didn't understand the market at all because where I was doing real estate.
And quick question for you. Did you get your license and everything before you moved out here?
Yeah, so that's the tricky part. So when I got to Vegas, I assumed that I just go get my real estate license. I may have taken a couple classes to get my license, but there was actually a 6-month wait for my license.
Oh, wow.
So, and I think it was partially because I had my license in New York. So I have to do extra background checks.
That's when you stripped, was during that 6 months.
Exactly.
Okay,
actually, it's fun. I did work in a nightclub for a little while. So I had a 6-month wait and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do for 6 months? Thankfully, because of the long escrows in New York, I still had stuff closing. So I was able to survive. And then I took a job at a nightclub. I don't know if you remember Privé nightclub.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I was a busboy there.
Yeah.
I think I was there for
was that on East Flamingo?
2 or 3 months. No, it was in, gosh, what hotel is that? Planet Hollywood.
Oh yes. Okay. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. So it was like the place to be back then. And and back then it was really hard to get a job in a nightclub. I don't know if it is anymore, but I was able to get a job there as a busboy, and I thought that was kind of cool. And
one of the points I wanted to bring up too is when you first talked about getting into real estate and how long it took to get your first check. I think that's the one thing that, sometimes people don't, they think of like a job, right? They get into real estate and they think, I should see a check in 30 to 60 days. And the realization is you don't, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what type of market you start in, even some of the best markets, you can start. And by the time you get started and you go out and you prospect and you develop your first client, which can typically take 60 to 90 days, right? Yeah. And then you're still another 30 to 60 days behind that before you're getting paid. So reality is that you've got 5 or 6 months that you're not getting paid anything.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's an important thing to bring up with people because I think sometimes they can even get a little frustrated in that time or they walk in with the wrong expectation. And I always tell everyone it's like any business, right? It doesn't matter if you open a retail store or a restaurant, is that the first 6 months are going to be really tough. And then you're going to start to get a little bit of business going and you're going to have your ups and downs, even in a great market. If you start in a great market, which we know there's a lot of agents that started within the last 2 years. And so you have those ups and downs. And then really reality is, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, I think it takes about 3 to 5 years to really build that business before you start to see the return as far as the time that you've spent, where you start to get referrals and people actually calling you to do business versus you prospecting and developing that business.
Yeah.
Would you say?
I would agree with that. I would say it's probably at least 3 years till you start seeing referrals come in.
Yep.
And I always tell everyone, I mean, even, at your level of the business that you're doing, it's still a little bit of a roller coaster, right? Because if you're used to closing 10 or 15 transactions a month and you have a month where you close 8, going from 8 to 15 or 15 to 8 still hurts. Obviously it hurts more when you go from 1 to 0. But
and especially because, people, sometimes they forget about it that, as a real estate agent, it's not just you on your own. I mean, you've got several administrative staff. I've got administrative staff. And so you start to build this infrastructure, right? That has to be supported by those sales. And so just like any business, when you have your slumps, you fill it in those months and you've got a plan for it as well, which I think is really important to note. So I wanted to get into, really talking about, so you're 2005, you come out, you get your license in 05?
Yeah. So it was 2006. So I got here, waited about 6 months, finally got my real estate license. I started on a team at Prudential, which is now Berkshire Hathaway. Started with them immediately. I was lucky enough that an appraiser that I worked with in New York, her sister had a real estate team out here. So just coincidentally, she's like, oh, call my sister. She has a team out there. So didn't interview anywhere else. Just went and worked for her. Started as a team associate. And then she made me a team manager. Then I landed up leaving the team and was just a independent agent. Then I had a business partner for a little while.
And how long was that you were on the team?
I would say it was about a year or so. Once the market started to shift, the lady that I actually worked for landed up leaving the business.
Oh, wow.
So she decided that, the business wasn't for her.
Yeah.
And she went and did a couple other endeavors. But yeah, I would say it was about a year or so, a year and a half that I was team associate and then a team manager.
And let's talk about that for a minute, teams. So I think it's really important. I think especially for new agents starting out, and especially if you want to succeed in real estate. You know, when I first started, you know, everybody thought I was nuts as I was joining a team, and they're like, "Oh, you're going to give half your money away." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'd rather have 50% of something than 100% of nothing." And my thought process at the time was, I don't care. Like, I didn't go to college, right? So I never spent money on college. And so for me, joining that team was 2 years of me learning. And my goal the first 2 years was, you know, I had another job as well. I was still bartending, and, you know, had that income coming in. But my goal was, I just want to learn. I want to learn from the very best, and I want to mirror what they do. And was that kind of your reason for joining a team, was so that you could, one, learn the market and learn the business out here in the Valley?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that I knew no one out here.
Yeah.
Didn't know the area at all. Knew nothing about Vegas. I'd never been here before, and I came here for a couple days and then moved out here. So 100%. And actually, we, till this day, you know, my thought process on teams is, if you're a new agent, 1,000% you need to join a team.
Yeah.
Even agents that we interview at the office, typically I will send them out to go interview with 3 or 4 or 5 of the teams that I feel would be a good fit for them outside of our company.
Yeah.
Because we're never going to take somebody on that they're going to fall on their face.
Yeah.
And it's too hard. The business is too hard right now. There's very few people that start as a brand new agent on their own and make it.
Yeah.
And when I say brand new, I don't even look at the years in the business. Brand new to me is if you're doing anything under probably 10 transactions a year. In my opinion, you're brand new, whether you've had your license for a day or you've had it for 3 years. You're brand new. And if you're doing that type of volume, 1,000% you need a team. And even if you are doing good volume, there's definitely benefits to a team. I like to think of it as like a supercharger for your business, right?
I agree.
So you can accomplish, you know, something that you try and do it on your own that takes you 5 or 8 years to get going. If you go on the right team with the right leader, I would say you can trim that down to a year or 2, like you said, and then you would have probably just about the same amount of knowledge that you gained in that 5 or 8 years.
Well, there's a camaraderie. There's the competition, right? Your internal competition. You want to compete with people on your team, even though you're on the same team. And I think just having that mentor there to support you, I think is really important. I've always kind of felt that I almost feel that it should be, you know, any other profession that you go into, you usually have to work you understudy it, right? Whether you're a physician or an attorney or anything else, you don't just get to go day one and start representing people or taking care of people. And I kind of feel the same way in real estate, that I really think this should almost be a requirement, that at least the first year to 2 years, the first 25 transactions or whatever it is, you work under a lead agent or a mentor and you learn from them. And I think now, going into the recession and the slowdown that we've seen in the market, I think it's going to be even more important now that, you know, I think some agents look at it as, well, now I definitely couldn't cut my commission because I'm going to be making less. And it's like, if you're solely looking at just the percentage that you're going to make versus what you're going to gross dollar-wise, you're looking at it the wrong way. If you're saying, well, I need to make 100% of my commission, then you're not seeing the value in all those other things. And again, like I said earlier, I always had the mindset of that I'd rather have 50% of something than 100% of nothing.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So,
and I think the important part too is you don't just focus on that one deal. It's the snowball effect, right? So if on your own you would have done 3 deals your first year, but on a team you get 25 transactions done. Now you have 25 people that could potentially refer you business.
Yep.
And now you're building a database. So you do that for 2 or 3 years. Now you have 75 or 100 people in your database that are going to refer you business, and then the business starts snowballing.
Yeah.
So there's so many benefits to it. And I think the key part though is that you have to join the right team.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be the right fit for you. It has to be someone that's doing the type of business that you want to do.
Yeah.
I think there's way too many teams out there that are just operating as a team, and the team leader's thought process is, I just want to hire people to make money off them.
It's like multi-level marketing.
If that's their thought process, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So it's important, if you're going to join a team, go out and interview a bunch of teams, or call someone like Darin or myself. even if we weren't hiring, I'll still have a conversation, and I'm sure you would do the same thing and guide you in the right direction, because I don't want to see anyone fail.
No.
And that's like the same thing for our office. Like anybody that comes and works underneath our roof, they're going to succeed.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to hire them unless they're going to succeed.
One of the smart things that one of the agents that just recently joined my team, I thought this was really smart of her. And I had a lot of respect that she did it. She said, hey, after I went through everything with her, she said, would you mind if I reached out to 2 or 3 of the agents on the team?
Smart.
And asked them how their experience has been. And I thought that was really smart. I'd never had anybody ask me that. And I was like, wow, that's really smart. She's doing her due diligence to make sure that what I'm presenting is real, right? And so that made me also feel comfortable that as an agent, she's going to be just as thorough, you know? So I thought that was really great. So let's talk about, 2006, you're on the team. Now you're getting ready to go on your own. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah, I would say towards the end of 2006, I really started to get going. My primary focus in 2006 and 2007 were expired and withdrawn listings. It was pretty much 100%
and so you were cold calling?
All I would do was phone calls. I found that I was pretty good on the phone. So I would do my phone calls, go out on listing appointments. I knew I only wanted to be on the listing side, so I strictly focused on that.
And that's such a great thing to think about too, because you came here into a market where you didn't know anyone.
Yep.
And so you had no choice but to make calls, because that's the only way you're going to get business.
Yep. Absolutely. And if you think about it, it's easier too, right? I call this expired. I go on a listing appointment. I only need to know about that house and be educated on that house and that community. So I could easily, sell them on working with me versus a buyer. I may show all over the city. They ask me a question. Hey, what do you think of this community? I don't know. I don't even know where we are. Are we on the east side? Are we on Summerlin? I don't know. It's all the same to me.
Do you know how to get back to where we were at? Yeah.
Yeah. It's to me, it was actually easier. And I always like that. I wouldn't say instant gratification, but I want to go out on an appointment. I want to know, do you want to work with me or not work with me? And if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I want you sign today if we're going to work together. And I know versus, a buyer, you're taking them out and you're showing them. I mean, I think I've done maybe 20 buyer transactions in 19 years. I'm right there with you, I don't even know, 8,000 transactions. I think I've done maybe 20. And that's only because for the most part, they bought my listing.
Yep.
So yeah, I've never been good with it.
Or I had a seller that said, hey, will you take me and show me some homes? I'm like, okay.
Yeah. A few of those. But yeah, so 2006, 2007, I was doing just expired withdrawns. And then, as the market started to shift and it felt like it shifted quickly, right?
Yeah.
But really there were signs for months and months, but we all
What were some of those signs, just out of curiosity?
Inventory growing, things not selling as quickly, kind of signs like we have today, but it's a different.
People letting off the gas a little bit.
It's different. And people that, you go and talk to someone and you find out that they own 3 and 4 and 5 homes and they really could barely afford the one.
Yeah.
And then the other 4, they were just banking on appreciation.
Reference the movie The Big Short for that.
Yep, absolutely.
Right?
Even my first house I bought, when I purchased here, it was an interest-only loan, 100% financing. I had a first and a second. And quite honestly, I shouldn't have been able to get a loan because I was coming from the New York real estate market. I had transitioned here. I had no track record here, but they gave me a loan.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have had one. So,
and I think I want to point that out because I think in today's market, that is one concern from people, right? Is that, we're going to have another 2008. And I always tell clients, there's a difference. The difference is that today the lending practices are different, right? And that, last number I saw was 83% of residents in Las Vegas, and I'm sure this applies to most of the country at this point, but 83% of residents in Las Vegas have 6 figures or more in equity in their home. And so nobody's walking away. And the other thing is that what changed is in the lending practices now is that mostly everybody's put down 10 or 20%. So if they bought a $750,000 home, they've put down $150,000, $75,000 to $150,000. One, they're not going to walk away from that, and they're not going to walk away from the $300,000 or $400,000 in equity that they have in that home. So I think that's the big difference now. Also, is that you have people that could truly afford those homes that are in them. They're going to still continue to work. And just like I was joking with a client the other day, I said, "Hey, if it came down to it right now in this situation, I've got so much equity in my house, I'll go get a second job to make sure I don't lose that house because I'm not losing all that equity." So I think that's a great thing to bring up, especially talking about the difference in today's recession that we're going into versus what we saw back in 2008. And that's why for me, I don't panic as much, and I don't feel like clients should panic as much because I think it's just different market now.
Yeah. I think plus, the people that bought in the last 2 years, you think about how much they put down plus how much they paid over appraised value, cash out of pocket.
Yeah.
So for them to walk away would be pretty challenging. But when you put nothing down, when you have nothing in it, it's easy to walk away from it.
Yeah. No skin in the game.
I'm upside down in this house. Doesn't make sense. I'm just going to walk away. So I do
think
it's a different market.
Houses. Yeah. I'm going to let them all go.
Yeah. It's definitely a different market. But, we are seeing inventory grow. We are starting to see some, retraction on some pricing.
Yeah.
But most of it, a lot of the price reductions we're seeing are people that are grossly overpriced.
Yep.
And we've, probably most agents have a few of those clients.
Yeah.
But the thing that nobody's really talking about is the amount of homes that are coming off the market. So I think what's happening is a lot of people are saying, okay, I don't want to miss out. I'm going to put my house on the market. And then they're realizing that they can't get the same number that they could get 3 or 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So now they're pulling them off the market.
Yeah.
So as much inventory as we're seeing, we're also seeing stuff come off the market. So I'm curious to watch the next 60 days and we track it, I look on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But really watch it at least on a weekly basis. And I'm curious to see what happens in the next 60 days because our inventory has grown, but I'm wondering if it's going to taper off a bit.
Yeah.
Once people get over like the scare factor and the shock factor and, the media of course doesn't help. And,
well, and I think a great point to bring up and everybody forgets about seasonality, right? It's the season.
Yep.
And so we're in the summer season for Vegas, which is 113 degrees. And a lot of people don't want to go look at homes when it's 113 degrees. Also, and I know, I think you said that, you looked at last year and even during last year, June, July, August was about a 20% reduction?
July, August, we usually see about 15 to 20% less sales, at least what we've seen as an agency, maybe 15%. So we typically see a little bit of a retraction and it makes sense, right? You have your kids, your family, you're doing your last minute summer vacations, you're getting prepped for school, buying a house, maybe not quite as much of a priority. Plus going out and looking at property in 110 is not the most delightful thing, especially in a suit.
And I've even seen that even more. And I think in luxury, what I've always saw in the past and looking at history is that, we'd see as much as a 30 to 40% decrease. And I know that even personally, a lot of clients this year, because last year and the year before, they didn't do their normal long vacations. They might've done a short vacation. Mm-hmm. This year, it's like most of my clients are like, yeah, we went to California for a week and then we're going to Europe for a month and then we're going to Montana for 2 weeks. And like, they're almost gone the entire summer. So I think, in my opinion, I think we're going to see as we round out of the summer and we go into September. And the good thing is kids go back to school a little bit earlier this year. So I think we're going to see an uptick again in September. And I don't know what you're seeing, but I'm also seeing that buyers right now are starting to become a little more conditioned to the interest rate and still realizing that, if I look historically, the interest rates are still fairly low and that I just have to make an adjustment a little bit on the price point that I was going to purchase. And the good news is more inventory, they can negotiate more now.
Yep.
And so they may even be able that house that they thought they maybe couldn't get, maybe they can negotiate $50,000 off of it and still qualify and get into the home that they wanted to get into. So I think that's an important
more options out there for clients. Definitely can negotiate for sure. And contingencies, right? So if you have a house you want to sell and you want to buy, you actually have a chance to do that
exactly.
now. Where a year, 6 months ago, you wouldn't have a shot at getting a contingent offer accepted.
And I know a lot of sellers that we had that stalled and said, I'm going to pull the house off the market or I'm going to wait because there's nothing out there. And so they would pull the house off the market, even though the market was great and they could have got a high amount of money for their house. They decided to wait. And so I think that's one thing that's really important to think about is that will, I think in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be as bad as people think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And again, just like I share with all the team, it's all how you treat it. And, that leads into us talking about opportunities. And so let's talk about 2007. I know you shared a story where you kind of got to a point where I know you were having like these massive headaches, right? Because I think it was if I recall correctly, it was like June 2007. It's kind of like when everybody's like, oh crap.
Yeah, it was definitely towards the end of 2007. So the beginning of 2007, I went in contract. I had, I didn't put my house up for sale yet, but I had a small, 2-story single car garage. I found this house in Mountain's Edge, about 2,000 square feet. Go into contract, new construction. It was Kimball Homes, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yep, I remember Kimball.
So I went in contract on that house, and it was, a 9 or 10 month build. And as I'm building this house, we're getting all these signs that the market's not
like,
doing well. So I'm, kind of panicking, but you know, the builder at the time was paying a 6% commission. So I'm like, well, worst case, I can make my payments for like 12 months or whatever. And that, unfortunately, that was my part of my thought process. So if you're thinking that way right now, do not buy.
You're like, I got to close this deal so I can get the commission.
Yeah. So I put my house that as we got closer, I put it up for sale, found a buyer. They wanted to close right away. So I had to close, and I had, it was probably about a 30-day or so window that I had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be a great idea to go stay at the South Point. So I got a room at the South Point. And during that 30-day time, I mean, it was like depression mode, because, the work life, everybody's talking about is the market's crashing, everything's falling apart. I'm in contract to buy a house where I have, an earnest deposit and maybe options, maybe $10,000 or $15,000 tied up, which at the time was a good amount of money that I didn't want to walk away from. Plus I had a 6% commission dangling there. And I had to live somewhere. So I'm staying at South Point. I remember going into South Point and getting these headaches that I literally couldn't even open my eyes.
Wow.
Like, it was so bad. I was so stressed. Probably my blood pressure.
Yeah. I bet.
But for 30 days straight, walking through the smoky casino, going up to my room and questioning everything. Like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I here? This whole market's crashing. And really just thinking about, why don't I just go back to New York?
Yeah.
It's where I know everyone.
Yeah.
I was doing pretty well in real estate for my first year in the business. Could have grown off of that, grew that business. Like, what am I doing here? And then I decided, you know what? Like, I'm going to give this one more shot. And I evaluated, okay, as the market's crashing, who is doing well?
So where are the opportunities?
Where's the opportunity? Who is doing well in the business? There was a guy at the time in my office that was doing really well in the REO business, which I didn't even know what REO was at the time.
Yeah.
The guys that were handling the REO business were long time, been doing it for 20 something years. They've had, markets where they did 5 sales and then markets where they did, 500.
Yeah.
So I saw that he was doing really well, was super busy, and started looking at, okay, how do I get this business? So, I asked him some questions and didn't really get too far because he wanted the business. He didn't want anyone taking from his business. So I started doing research online and trying to find a resume. What does a resume look like for an REO agent?
Yeah.
Found a resume online and, took it and, made mine.
Modified it.
Made mine with some of the key verbiage for REO. And I took, at the time, was the expired script that I was using for the Mike Ferry organization. And I looked at that script and I said, okay, how do I turn this into something that a bank asset manager is going to want to hear?
Yeah.
Kind of wrote out my own little script. So I had something to go off of when I was making calls. And I just started dialing different banks that I heard had REO. So I'd go through tax record and see, okay, that's IndyMac.
Yeah.
IndyMac Bank. Okay, they're really big right now. Now I got to get in touch with IndyMac. Who's the person at IndyMac? So I would start with their 800 number and just go from one person to the next person to the next person until I got the decision maker.
So you're which was hours on the phone.
Yes. Yeah. Which was either their vendor services or vendor manager. I think that's what they called it at the time, or the asset manager. And I would go through my script with them, see if they give me a shot, get them to give me one property, or I would ask them if I can go visit any of their properties that they currently have to go check on them. And that was a great way to get business because when I would go check on them, none of the agents were taking care of them. So I would send them pictures and say, hey, this is what they look like. And they would literally yank them all. And I'd have 20 in it at the same time, 20 new listings or 10 new listings.
Did you have a coach or anything at that time? Or this is just all on your own? You're figuring it out?
I was actually still in Mike Ferry coaching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
awesome.
I started in the Mike Ferry coaching. And at the time, once I started going the REO route, I pulled away from coaching because it was a little bit, just a different business than what they were preaching. They were still, expired, withdrawn, for sale by owner.
Yeah.
And that business, like, if you can imagine going on a listing appointment and, a seller says, you're showing them comps at 500,000 and then you're telling them we got to price it at 4.25 to get interest.
Yeah.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.
We owe 490.
Yeah.
So that was the pitch pretty much every time. And I was like, it's just not working. And nobody had equity at the time.
Yeah.
No one had equity because everyone bought with 100% financing or they owned multiple.
Yep.
And they didn't believe that the market could crash, right? So, a lot of us that have been in the business a long time, you have a little bit of PTSD. You think, well, because it was that way back then, it's going to be this way, the same way this time, which isn't always necessarily true.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was calling and I would just, IndyMac, I think was the first bank that I landed. And they were really good to me. And then once I had one, then I knew exactly what I had to say and I understood the process. And then I would just go after other banks. And at one point I was working with about 30 different banks and asset management companies.
Wow.
My best year doing it, I sold 311 properties myself.
Holy crap. What year was that?
2000, I think that was 11.
Wow. So still at the bottom of the market. I mean, we're still, it wasn't a great market yet.
Nope.
People were still struggling. Interest rates, I think at that point were,
I don't even remember.
They're higher than what they are now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they were somewhere in the 6s at that point.
Yeah.
They were doing some like stuff to stimulate and get people to buy. But, but sales prices were super low. So 300 and something deals back then would be like doing 60 right now. Maybe 100 right now. Prices were pretty much a third.
Yeah.
So, that was the business that,
and
I liked the business.
And I think a lot of people forget, like those deals took longer, right? I mean, I remember doing some short sales.
So short sales did, but REO didn't.
Okay,
REO was just like a regular
it's already
seller.
Bank owned.
Yep. Just like a regular seller, but you had to work the relationship. So I would fly out. They would have conferences in Texas, or I would just go directly to the banks. And I would go cater lunch and go meet and greet with all these people, which was totally out of my character at that time. But I knew that that's what I had to do to survive or really to thrive in that market.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits when in a down market, if your business can take off and you can get your income up, now you have the opportunity to, capitalize and buy property and invest in real estate.
Yep.
And at the time, I mean, I remember turning down houses, backing out of contracts for a single family home I remember one in particular. I still think about it all the time. The one that got away. It was a single family house in Charleston Heights. I was in contract at $51,000.
Okay.
And there was
$51,000?
$51,000. Yeah.
Holy crap.
And it was like a 1,300 square foot house, 2-car garage.
Now it's on the market for $750.
Yeah, exactly. and there was a little issue with the roof, and that's why I backed out. It was probably like a $1,000 repair. And I was like, no, I'm not. No, you reduce it or not. And they're like, well, no, we're not going any further down. I'm like, okay, I'll walk.
Yeah.
But that's how the market was back then. So if, I don't foresee that happening right now just because of the amount of equity, but we are in for a little bit of rough waters. I think we're already kind of feeling it, and not necessarily from a pricing standpoint, but just, buyers that are hesitant, sellers that are still attached to 6 months or a year ago, what was going on in the market. And it's just going to take a little time for people to get okay with everything.
Yeah.
But there is an opportunity right now too. And I think buyers, if they're smart right now and they're out looking, they can really take advantage and get a great deal on a house.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, so what do you see for agents that are in this market today, or anybody, I think, in business for the most part? Like, what are the opportunities you see in this market right now? I mean, I know a lot of people that I've talked to, and even including you when I heard you talk last time, is that, I mean, everybody's doubling down.
Yep.
Any of the successful business owners that I know, it doesn't matter what business it is, whether it's real estate or anything else, they're like, no, Darin, right now is the time I'm doubling down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spending more money on advertising. I'm spending more money on infrastructure. I'm doing all of these things to ramp up and get myself ahead of everyone else. While everyone else is letting their foot off the gas, you guys are stepping on the gas, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I think, last 2 years, I think a lot of real estate professionals, and maybe even in the lending business too, and title, and maybe most businesses, everybody got fat and happy, right?
Yeah.
And some people lost their drive, and now is the time to really turn it on. So like, even as an agency, I mean, we've committed, financially to a lot of things in the last 30 days that we didn't have in place before. I mean, everything from PR to a marketing agency we have quite a few things going, because I see this as the greatest opportunity for our agency and our agents to grow their business, because I've done it before. And I know that it's our chance to really capitalize on market share. And the last 60 days, I haven't really shared this with the office yet, but the last 60 days, we've gained quite a bit of market share as an agency. And I think that's going to continue to happen, because the great part is we're such a small, tight knit group, and we can collaborate and we can really kind of keep an eye on each other and push each other. And there's not really anyone in our office that's filled with negativity. And as soon as there is someone, it's easy for us to help put them in check. So I mean, for us, I look at this as probably the greatest opportunity we're going to have as an agency to grow. And
I agree, and I think that's the important factor to keep in mind. I think that if your agent is not an ambassador of this industry or positive or is optimistic and has a positive outlook on the opportunities in this market for you, if they're listing your home, I mean, keep in mind, if they're negative about the market, how are they going to aggressively or strongly negotiate for you, right? They're not confident. And I think the key to remember is that in any industry, whatever you're selling, one, you've got to know your product, right? You got to be educated. And that means that not just knowing the product of what you're selling, but knowing the market and all that stuff as well. But being confident and feeling strong in that. And if your agent's posting negative things about how the market's going to crash, and I see this stuff all the time, I always relate it to I said, it's like going to a restaurant and you ask the waiter, hey, how's the food? And the waiter says, well, it's all right. I don't know if I would eat here if I were you. I'd probably come back another time. Yeah. That's what I see some of these agents put out there, and it just surprises me. And I think that's a really important factor is that, and I shared that with you, and I talked about it a little while back that with the team, like, no, we are not accepting that. We won't accept the market. This is when we put our foot on the gas. And if we were making 50 calls, now we make 100 calls, right? If we were working 40 hours or 50 hours because it was easy, now we might have to work 60 hours. We're going to have to do more open houses. Everything has to ramp up and we have to be aggressive. But the good thing is, and we saw this back in 09 and stuff as well, is that the number of agents, our competition will shrink, just like in any business. And I've always seen this in any business. I owned a retail store at one point, and I've seen this in other industries where when the market gets rough, unfortunately, some people go away, right? The upside of that is, as a business owner, is that that's when there's opportunities because there's less competition, and now you can get out there and you can capture more people. Just like I saw so many people do this with the shutdown with COVID, was that I saw some restaurants ramp up. Right? They became more aggressive. I talked to one gentleman who owned the barbecue place right there by the office, and he said, Darin, this is actually the best I've ever done. Because he stayed open and he was doing deliveries, and he just got creative, and he was doing deliveries and all this different stuff, doing like family packs for homes. And now his business is better than ever because now all those people learned about him, because when all these other places closed, he stayed open and he kept servicing. He worked with what was available, and now his business is better than ever. And I think that's the one thing to remember for agents or anybody out there is that if you can survive through this and you can actually thrive through it because there's going to be less competition. So there's less people that you're competing with. And when the market comes back, you're going to be ahead of it. And I think that's an important thing to think about.
Absolutely. I think believing in it too. I think that's another key part is that you got to believe in the market. You got to believe in our city. And if you don't think that, if you wouldn't buy in this market, then why should your client buy in this market? I could tell you I'm in contract on a house. I went in contract 2 or 3 days ago. On an investment property. And most people would be like, well, why would you buy an investment property? You know what? I believe in the area that I'm buying. I like the purchase price that I got. And I think long-term, the city's going to do really well. So I believe in it. So, I'm okay with telling clients that it's okay to buy. You just got to find the right deal. And you got to take advantage as best you can. And same for a seller. If your property's positioned well and it's marketed well, it's going to sell. You just have to be reasonable. You can't, if the last one sold at 900,000, you can't ask 1.4.
Exactly.
I mean, you just can't. And 6 months ago, you could. And we had, as agents, we had no say. We could, if a seller says, hey, I want to ask this for a house, we would just go with it because 99% of the time they were right. So even if it made no sense, and now things are logical and they make sense. So you just, as a seller, you got to position the property correctly. As an agent, you got to believe in the product. You got to believe in the market and believe in the city. And if you do that, you'll do just fine. And you got to put the work in.
And I think that's a great point. I grew up in Vegas, and so many times through our history here, it's almost like people wanted to see Vegas fail. And I can tell you so many different times I've watched Vegas go through all these evolutions. One time they were the family-friendly city, right? And we had like 9 different amusement parks here and roller coasters, and that didn't work and that failed. And all of a sudden they reinvented themselves and they came back even bigger and better. And that's the one thing that always restores confidence for me in Vegas is that one, there's so much money behind these casinos, right? They will not let the city fail. Number one, they will reinvent it. And look at what they did when gaming started to decline. What was the first thing they did? They started to allow in pro sports teams. Growing up here, I was always, you'll never see a professional sports team in Vegas. Well, guess what? Once the casinos and gaming saw that, hey, gaming's lowering, we better start thinking outside the box. And they started, now we've brought all these, and now we've become this big sports mecca, right? Of all these professional teams coming here, and everybody wants to come here now. So Vegas, I'm a big believer in Vegas as well, because I've seen it so many times reinvent itself, and this market comes back bigger and better and stronger. And I think the other difference is, I think that, 2008, up to 2008, a lot of people were moving here because they thought it was quick money, right? I have so many friends that moved here. They were going to be a valet parker and make $150,000 a year and kill it. And then they were going to pack up and they were going to move back home or go to California. Yep. And a lot of those people got stuck here. And I think the difference is now is that, 2008, a lot of people were very transient. They only planned to be here for a short period of time. And now we actually have a community where people see themselves growing old and retiring here and living here a long time. So there's so much more vested into the community now that I think long-term is going to make Vegas remain stable and be a good bet, in my opinion.
I agree with that. And I think for me, I could even feel that with my family, that it's definitely a more community oriented than when I first got here.
Yeah.
When I first got here, everybody was out for themselves.
Yeah.
It felt very much like that. Everybody was there for $1.
Yeah.
But it really has shifted.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's going to continue to shift too.
Yeah.
It's going to become more and more community oriented.
I agree. So I want to, as we wrap up here, I wanted to touch real quickly, because obviously you started your own business. You started your own brokerage. What year did you start your own brokerage?
So we just, we're 6 years. So 2016.
16? Okay. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
And what was it at that point that just, you were in 2016? I mean, people, that was still a little, it wasn't, the market wasn't great at that point. I remember even in 2016, because that's when I bought my house, everybody said, oh, you're an idiot. Like, the market's going to crash. That was in 2016.
Yep.
And I can tell you, I have double what I paid for my home in equity now. So
yeah. I think for me, when I started the company, I was 13, 14 years in the business. I originally I just wanted to be my team.
Yeah.
That was the plan, was just, hey, it's gonna be a small brokerage, just the team. But I wanted to create a culture and environment that I wanted to be at, that I could thrive in.
Yeah.
So in creating that, we started
Heaven's waiting door or a waiting room.
Exactly.
I've heard some offices home referred to.
The funeral home. And I think that was lacking in our industry. Most real estate offices, unfortunately, they're just, and it's probably just because of the mix of, part-time agents and, people that, do one deal a year. That's the only thing I could think of as to why a real estate office is like that. But for me, if I'm going to be in a sales environment, it needs to feel like a sales environment. I want to walk in and be like pumped up.
Yeah.
I feed off that energy. So, once we created that environment, we started having agents reach out. I remember one of the agents in our office who, I had a high level of respect for, doing a ton of business. He reached out to me and he said, hey, can we grab coffee? I went and met with him. And this was one of our first big agents that we brought over. I thought he wanted to open a company. So I'm giving him all this information for an hour on everything. And at the end, he's like, so will you take us on? And I was like, what do you mean you want to join my company? So that was the first eye opener. And then it kept happening.
Yeah.
And then we were just very particular on who we hired. And I think that was the key part, is that, we had standards and we've stuck to the standards. And I think in the real estate industry, it's hard to maintain standards, because it's very tempting when you own a business to take on maybe an agent that does one deal or two deals or four deals, because that may be your biggest moneymaker as a broker, because you have them on a low split and you're taking a big piece of it. And I just didn't want to do that. Yeah. That wasn't for me. I want to be around people that want more and want to grow their business and, have a good, strong, positive mindset. So I like to say it was a slow grow.
Yeah.
We originally started with, I think there was 8 of us total and 1 or 2 staff. And now we're at like 108 agents.
Wow. That's awesome.
But over 6 years, so it was a slow grow. And, thankfully we've had we've retained, pretty much everybody that has come through the door.
Yep.
that I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah.
Because it's hard in this industry to, keep people, because there's so many other things. I know our agents get texts. You probably have 10 on your phone from, brokers trying to recruit and stuff like that. And we don't recruit at all.
Yeah.
So it's just everybody that's at the office has been like a natural attraction to the office. And even when we interview, even if it's someone I really want at the office, I'll still recommend they go meet with a couple other brokers.
Yeah.
And, or a couple other teams.
Go date a little bit.
Exactly. Because, and that's probably why we've been able to, retain, people at the office, is because they've gone out, they know what else is out there. And they see value in the company. So, and I want them to feel that way. I always tell people, hey, it's an open door. Like if there's ever a day where you're like, I don't really like Craig. Or, I don't like being at this office or whatever. Like I want them to feel comfortable and say, hey, it's just not for me, because there's no sense in keeping people at the office that aren't happy. By trying to hold their stuff or make it difficult for them, or just make it just an awful process. So, and I think that's worked to our favor, but it's been a little bit slower grow, but we have, 100 and I think we're at 105, 110. And this year we should be able to, the goal is $1 billion in sales and, 2,000 or so transactions.
Awesome.
And we're a little bit behind, but we're going to make some headway here.
We got
shortly.
fourth quarter coming up, which is always strong. So, and I think that's the biggest thing I like to point out to everyone is that, when they ask me, well, what's the difference in the office? I said, the difference is that, a lot of offices you go to, people are order takers. They sit and they wait and I think that just relates to this market in general, is that there's two versions of salespeople in my mind. There's a true salesperson, which is a pioneer. They go out and they pioneer business, and they will find business in any market, right? And then there's an order taker. And those are the people that hurt in a recession, because they sit back and they wait for orders or sales to come to them. And when the sales drop, they drop with it. Whereas, like I said, the salespeople, they're always looking for the opportunities. So,
absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming in today, Craig, and being my first guest.
Thank you.
On the Darin Marques Show, and part of Recession Busters. This is going to be our series that we're going to be doing over the next few months. I think it's really important right now in this market to be able to have inspirational stories and have business owners in here that can encourage people that it's not going to be the end of the world. That there is still a time that it's a great time to start a business and to thrive in this industry. So thank you for joining us today, man. And if you guys get a chance, make sure you go on, number one, and follow Huntington and Ellis on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to learn more about the company, you can go to huntingtonandellis.com and check it out. And again, man, I really appreciate you being my first guest.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's my pleasure.
All right. Thank you, guys.